Hello. I don't know. Hi. I'm Sarah. I'm an alcoholic, and my sobriety date is February 18th, 2007. And by the grace of God, the Fellowship of AA, good sponsorship, and the 12 steps, I haven't found it necessary to pick up a drink or a drug since then. And that's a miracle if you've ever met me. And I always get nervous when I speak. I've been told I do a good job, but I have like no recollection of what happens during the hour. So I just go by what people tell me. And I was telling my mom, I talk to her like 2 or 3 times a week, and every time I'm on the phone, I'm always like, oh, I have to do this tomorrow, and I'm speaking here, I'm speaking here. And she asked me one time, she's like, why do you have to speak so often? I'm like, oh, well, I have a good story. And she's like, oh my God, how bad are these people's stories if yours is a good one? Because she got to be an integral part and a witness to most of my drinking. So she cannot figure out why anyone would want to hear this story more than once. But you know, I have to say I'm grateful for every drink that got me in here, and for everything I've heard since I've been here. You know, I was a real alcoholic. I still am a real alcoholic. I had my first drink. I grew up in a little town called LaGrange, Illinois. It's a little bit outside the city. It's pretty small, and it's just a really small suburban town. You know, like we had a main drag where all the good stuff was, like the movie theater that cost $2 and had movies that were 2 years old, and it closed at like 9. And there was a 7-Eleven that was literally open from 7 to 11. It wasn't 24 hours. I mean, there was just like nothing going on in this town. There were like as many churches as there were people. And there was just, I just remember being bored so often when I was growing up. Like I just had this like dream of a life that was like exciting and filled with drama and chaos. And I was in LaGrange, and it just wasn't happening. I had my first drink when I was 12, and up to that point, I did not know there was anything different about me. I really didn't, because I didn't know there was anything different about the way I felt or acted that was different than anybody else, because it was the only thing I knew. And I just remember being uncomfortable in my own skin all the time, just never feeling like I was normal or okay or like everybody else. All I could see was the things that other people had or were, and the assets and traits that they had, and I wanted to be just like them, and I wanted to have all the good qualities they had, and I just felt like I lacked all of them. And I was smart in school, and I had very strict parents. Like my parents are still together. They've been married for 45 years. I have an older brother and sister. They were very strict. You know, they had curfews and cleaning jobs and all this stuff to try to teach us how to grow up right. And they did a great job at raising their kids. My dad is, he's just a different person. When I grew up, I just remember being scared of him. He was just very scary. He's just scary. I mean, he was really tall, and he just had this voice that, like, he didn't have to yell. It was just scary, because, like, when he talked, it was never good. I mean, he didn't have anything good to say to any of us. So, and I wouldn't say he's one of us, and I know he drinks, and he drinks, as he would call it, socially. He just doesn't actually go out or have any friends. So it's a very small social drinking, but he drinks the way that I ended up drinking, and the way that I thought looked good, and it was quantity over quality, and it was, you know, plastic jugs of hard liquor, and he didn't understand the purpose of beer or ice or a glass, and I remember just being like, yeah, that's the way to go. And I watched him when I was younger, and he would come home from stressful days and stressful jobs, and he would just be totally on edge, restless, irritable, discontent. And then he would have a cocktail and talk to my mom about his day, and then he would have another, and he would go change from his business suit, and then he would have another right before dinner, and then he would have one with dinner. And by the time we had dinner, he was so happy and funny, and he would laugh until stuff came out his nose, and he had this laugh where he would laugh so hard he would stop breathing. And I just remember being like, yes, like whatever that is, that effect is fantastic. Because, you know, on other days when my dad didn't drink that much, he was like a live wire. And if you did or said something wrong, you found out about it real quick. And his version of discipline was usually physical, and it was usually the back of his hand. And there wasn't a lot of explanation as to what you did wrong, but you knew you did something wrong and you should never do it again. And like, those are the lessons that I took from growing up. And I certainly didn't know at the time that that's what I learned, but I learned to never let people see how you feel. Don't cry, and don't show fear, and that you can do things to change your mood. You can make simple changes, and all of a sudden, the world will be different. You know, what looked bad before will be great. And I spent my life, when I was younger, I would be perfect at home and try to like never make anybody mad. And I would go to school and I would get good grades, and in front of teachers I would behave and be perfect. And then out on the playground, I was a menace to people. I was like, I liked to get in fights. My mom had taught me one defense move, which was punch them in the nuts and run. And so I used that, but not in defense. It was more of an offense. You know, I would just literally go and punch a guy in the nuts, and then I would run away. And like, I got kind of a reputation for like, she's crazy. And it was something, you know, like, and I was swearing, and I would pick up cigarettes off the ground and smoke them, and I would just try to do all this bad stuff, and try to shock people and just put them on edge, and it made me feel good, and it made me feel cool, and it was that alcoholic tendency way before alcohol. It was like, what can I do to change how I feel inside and feel better and feel more comfortable without actually changing anything about myself? And it worked. And I had my first drink when I was 12. And I was super awkward and nervous and geeky, and just like, I had space between all my teeth, and I had braided my hair myself with like the cornrows. And I was just so awkward. And my sister had a party when my parents took my brother to college, and she didn't want me to tell on her for having all her friends over and for them drinking. So she sent one of her guy friends up to my room with a glass of lemonade and vodka, which was to become my drink of choice for the future. It was Crystal Light and vodka. And I drank the whole thing. And I don't remember anything other than I was so nervous when he came up and when I had to like talk to him and have this conversation, because he was like 14 and I was 12. And then all of a sudden, like, I felt just as cool as he was. And I remember being like, I can impress him, and I can impress all these people. And I went to my sister's party, and I was dancing and singing and out with her older friends and smoking cigarettes. And I just remember feeling so comfortable and so cool and confident, and like all my insecurities and everything, you know, like I didn't have freckles anymore. I didn't have funky hair or funky teeth. I just remember thinking like, I am so much cooler than all these people. And it was the best night of my drinking career. I had one drink, and I didn't get sick, and I didn't get caught, and I didn't throw up, and it was the greatest night ever. And that was the last time I ever had a night of drinking with impunity, without consequence. And my next drunk was like, I was 14, and my friends, I had 3 or 4 girlfriends, and we wanted to drink. That was our mission. And so we all said we were going to sleep at the other one's house, and like I was going to sleep at Ann's, and Ann was going to say she was sleeping at Jen's, and it's a recipe for disaster. And but we set it up so we would go to my friend Ann's house, and her parents were out of town, so we were going to drink. And so we started to have a shot contest with Southern Comfort. And my friend Jen is 6 feet tall in freshman year, and I was very small. And I won the shot contest. Like, I drank like a half a bottle, and the rest I don't remember. I started calling people to invite guys over to the party, and that's pretty much where I saw black. And the rest was in the police report the next day. And apparently, some of the neighbors thought someone had broken into this house because the people were supposed to be gone. So they called the police. When the police came, I took the officer's gun and ran around the house like Wyatt Earp. And then I threw up on his shoes, and then I went into a coma, and I was taken by ambulance to the hospital, and they pumped my stomach, and I didn't wake up for a couple days. And when I did, my parents were at the end of my bed, and they were not happy, and they were very angry and confused and bewildered at what had happened to their perfect child. And I asked them, did anybody see me throw up? Because, like, really, I don't care about anything other than, like, do my friends still think I'm cool and that I can handle my drinking? Because, like, this is my one thing I'm good at. I won the shot contest. And they were horrified by that response, and they grounded me for the summer. And that was the first time I was grounded for the summer. It was not the last. I was grounded every summer all through high school. Every year, I would always screw up right before summer break. And then I would be stuck in the house during summer. And my parents had me do manual labor to teach me a lesson. They made me tile the basement floor and then shingle the roof and blacktop the driveway and paint and prime the basement like 7 or 8 coats because it was concrete walls. And I learned all these really cool tricks about home maintenance that summer. And I was supposed to learn not to drink, and that this is the consequence of your drinking. And that is not at all what I learned. I just learned that I had to practice a lot more and get better at this, because this is the one thing that I'm good at. And so I'm going to keep doing it until I get it perfect. And by 15, I started to drink every day. My dad has a pretty extensive liquor cabinet, and I used to take, when he would open a fresh 1.75 of terrible vodka, I would take half of it out and fill it with water. And then I would proceed to drink all day at school and everything I was doing. And I really never thought about anything different about it. It made me feel okay. It was the only thing that gave me the confidence to talk to people, to socialize, to be in chorus, to be in plays. And I would have never thought different. Like, every day I woke up, it was like, okay, I need to take my medicine so I can go to school and be okay. And I felt really bad because the consequences of that were that, like, my dad was drinking like twice as much all the time, and my mom kept getting mad at him because every drink he made was half water. And so she was always getting on his case about how much he had increased his drinking. And I'm sure he knew that something was wrong, but if he told on me, then he wouldn't get to drink either. So he just kept a secret right along with me. And we did that for all of high school and most of college, and he just never mentioned that, you know, like vodka's not supposed to have condensation on the inside during summertime, but, you know, you learn these things after a while. But so I drank through all of high school, and I drank through driver's ed, and I learned how to drunk drive with an instructor. And I just really thought that alcohol made me Superman. It allowed me to do everything and do it better. I was smarter in school. I could give presentations. I could talk to people. And the rest of the time, I was totally filled with fear and anxiety. And I was socially just like awkward. And this allowed me to be like a normal person and have friends and boyfriends and everything. And by the end of high school, I had a pretty bad reputation. I had gotten busted every single year. I wasn't very smart when it came to not getting in trouble or not getting caught, and I always got caught. And I had also made a lot of bad decisions about, like, boyfriends, and turns out most of them were one of my friends' boyfriends, and they weren't mine. So I didn't have any friends or boyfriends at the end of high school, and I was ready to get the heck out of Illinois. It was time to go find somewhere that wasn't so small so that I could cause more damage in a larger space. And so I went to New York University, and I found it was a great playground for alcoholics. There's lots of bars and liquor stores, and I did really well. You know, I had a scholarship to go there, and I had to keep a high grade point average in order to stay in school, and just give an alcoholic a motivation to drink more, and I will meet it every time. Like, my mom still doesn't know how I got through college and did so well. It's like, well, because you told me that I would have to stop drinking if I didn't get these grades. So by God, I'm going to get the grades you need me to get so I can continue to drink. And I never really had real consequences. I didn't get in trouble or caught. You know, I lost friends, relationships, people's trust, my self-esteem, my self-worth, you know, but to me that was minor. You know, as long as I can drink at the end of the day, you know, I don't need anything else. Like, I don't need people. I don't need to feel good about myself because a drink will make it all go away. And I got through most of college that way. And towards the end, it started really starting to get to me. I was drinking every single day, and I was studying to be a teacher, and they don't recommend teaching while you're drunk. So I had been drunk for the last 8 years, so I was going to have to change some things. And changing majors at that point was not an option. So I started to not drink before I would go student teach. And I noticed that I was shaking a lot. And I thought this was some new illness that I had acquired. I was like, I don't know. And I looked up like symptoms that could bring it on, like diabetes. I was like, perhaps I'm diabetic. You know, it's like late onset childhood diabetes. And I like thought there may be some neurological condition that I had because I was hearing things and I wasn't sleeping well. But like it never occurred to me that drinking was the problem. And I used to get out of student teaching around like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I would walk to campus for my classes. And just the walk towards the liquor store before my first class, I would calm down and my heart rate would slow down and my shaking would stop. So I was like, doesn't have to do with drinking. I haven't had a drink and I'm fine. It's those kids. They make me nervous, you know? And I was really starting to worry though. Like I had no friends left. This party in New York and this big, exciting like social lifestyle was me, and my best friend had gone to study abroad because she wanted to get away from me. And my boyfriend kept making these crazy ultimatums about like, I won't date you anymore if you don't stop drinking. And when I would meet him at happy hour, he was like, I don't think you're getting the message. Like, I was like, so you want to meet at the bar? And he's like, I don't want to date you if you're going to drink. And I was like, so you don't want to go to happy hour? Like, I just didn't really understand what he was trying to tell me. And by the end of college, it was the gig was up. You know, I knew that the shaking was to do with drinking. I wasn't student teaching anymore, and I shook 24/7, and I had to drink all throughout the day to just keep the shakes at bay. And there was nobody left. I couldn't stay sober long enough to like try to maintain the friendships I had, because all of them had said, we just can't be around if you're going to continue to drink. And I was very alone. And I graduated college, and I did well. My parents showed up, and the day they came to my graduation, I had to stay sober because I was going to be around them. And it was a morning ceremony at like 10 o'clock at like Radio City Music Hall. And I went to go pick up my parents at the hotel room, and my dad apparently did not have to not drink for the day, and he had already had a drink. So already I had a resentment that he got to drink at 10 a.m. and I didn't. And so we went to graduation, and that's all I could think about. Like, I'm supposed to be excited about this day, and all I could think is it's not fair that I didn't get to drink, and that I don't have any with me, and that my dad gets to drink and I don't. And afterwards, we went to lunch at this fancy restaurant in New York to celebrate. And they said, you know, I wasn't 21 yet, and they said, you can have a drink, you know, to celebrate. And I shouldn't have, because one drink is not enough. And the rest of that meal was the most excruciatingly painful ordeal, because all I could do was stare at this drink that, like, I only got one of, and I had to, like, savor it. And my dad had, like, 12. And I was, like, so miserable, and I was shaky, and I was on edge, and I was just like, you know what? If all I get is one drink, then I'd rather have none, which is not true. I would still rather have one. But as soon as I got out of there, the first thing I did was go and stop at a liquor store and drink like I wanted to. And the next 3 months of that summer, I don't remember any of. I was graduated, my family was gone, my friends were gone, no one was watching me, I didn't have any responsibilities, and I could drink like I wanted to, and that's what I did. I drank every single day to oblivion, and I would wake up in the morning shaking, and I would try to hold down enough liquor so I could get to the liquor store, and then I would buy a bottle, go back home, and watch Maury Povich episodes most of the day. My favorite were the Who's My Baby Daddy episodes, because I thought that was going to be me someday, and like some horrible man was going to leave me with like a bunch of children and claim that they weren't his. Now, granted, I have no friends, no boyfriends, and I'm sleeping with no one, so I don't really know how but I would sit and I would cry, and I'd be like, this is me, this is my life. I'm on TV. And I was just totally delusional. And I just drank all day, and I was so miserable and scared. And I don't remember any of that summer. Most of it's a blackout. That was the same pattern I did every day. Somewhere on July 4th, I shaved my head because I was watching Apocalypse Now. And then I woke up somewhere in August or September. And my parents had called me, and they'd set me up with an interview in New York with one of their relatives. And I showed up at 9 a.m. for the interview drunk. And the gentleman, who's my mom's uncle, called them a couple days later. He didn't know what to do. And he just called and said, like, I don't know how to tell you this, but I think your daughter's in trouble. And they called me that day, and they caught me during one of my rather drunk moments, and they asked me what was going on, and I said, I drink all day, every day, and I can't stop, and I won't stop, so leave me alone. And I hung up. And the next morning, there was a knock on my door, and it was my parents. And they had gotten a flight and flown, and they told me, you're not going to take a drink. That's it, you're done. And they were pretty shocked because they had seen me in graduation like 3 months earlier, and I was a healthy, like 150 pounds and beer weight and bloated, and I was like 90 pounds, and I hadn't eaten in like months. And they said, you're not going to drink anymore. And I said, sure, okay, that sounds good. And then I had a grand mal seizure about 6 hours later, and I went into the emergency room, and I don't remember anything for a few weeks. I was there in ICU for 2.5 weeks. I couldn't walk. My legs had like atrophied, and I didn't know who I was. I had like wet brain at that point because I couldn't talk to anybody, and I couldn't walk or stand, and I had no idea what was going on. And the next thing I remember, they had me in a wheelchair, and I was back in Chicago, and they were taking me home. And I don't remember any of that, period. And I was scared out of my mind. I found myself, I woke up basically back in my old bedroom in my parents' house in Illinois, and I didn't know what had happened, but my best friend, alcohol, that had made me everything that I ever wanted to be, had like almost killed me. And it was really scary, and it scared me for about 30 days. And I hid in my parents' house, and I watched TV, and I was trying to get a little more stable or better, and it wasn't going well with my parents. I guess they didn't think Maury Povich had like a therapeutic aspect to it. So they were like, you need to do something and to get better. And we were at odds with each other all the time. And one day when they left, I just got frustrated and resentful and angry. And I went to my dad's liquor cabinet to see if he kept anything in there anymore. And he did. And there, all the memory of suffering, of humiliation of a week or a month ago disappeared. And I took a drink, and I was off to the races. And I did that for the next 6 months. And I went in and out of hospitals and institutions and therapy. And my parents got me a therapist who said that, why don't you just give her a shot when she's nervous? And so I was nervous a lot. And then they got me a gym membership because my dad believes in hard work and exercise will cure everything. And so he ran the track with me for a few days, and then he put me on my own to work out and get, stronger. And there was a bar in the gym, and that plan didn't work out. And then they got me a job at a law firm, and that was a great idea, except that there's this concept called happy hour, which the office really believes in. And they had softball team with softball games, and they had a keg of beer, and so the job didn't really work out for me in sobriety. So we tried all these different ideas, and they all ended up with me drunk. And my parents were getting more and more and more frustrated and angry, and they didn't know what to do. And I ruined Thanksgiving, and then I ruined Christmas. And finally, my mom said, if you drink again, we're going to kick you out. You're going to have to go find somewhere else to live because we're not going to watch you kill yourself with alcohol. And I was like, okay, I get it. And so she planned a New Year's party for me and my dad and her, and she said, we're all going to stay sober for New Year's together. And I said, that sounds awful. And she invited my one friend from grammar school that was still in town, and she invited him over for this party so that I would have someone to hang out with. And I just remember being like, this is the worst idea I've ever heard of. And so the day of New Year's, I got on my bike because I couldn't drive a car anymore. And I rode to the liquor store and I bought a bottle. And the whole time it was, the thought in my head was, I'm going to have to get really drunk if I'm going to stay sober for New Year's. And I did that, and I spent the afternoon drinking, and when my mom got home, she was very upset. She's like, did you not understand me? I told you if you drank again, you have to leave. And I said, you're right, I can't do this anymore. And I went in the bathroom and I slit my wrists. And I couldn't really come up with anything else. I had tried everything that they had come up with, and I had tried really hard not to drink on my own, and I tried going to therapy, and I tried everything, and I could not think of any other way other than if I die, I won't drink. And this thought came to me and said, you don't have to die, you just can't drink anymore. And for some reason, that sounded different than any other message before. And I went outside and I showed my mom what I did, and she dropped me off at the hospital, and she said, I'm not coming back to get you, so please get help. And I went to the hospital, and they stitched me up, and they sent me on my way, and I found myself in Illinois in the dead of winter, and I had nowhere to go. And so I called that one friend that they got for New Year's, and I asked him if he would come get me, and he lived with his parents, so he took me to his parents' house, and I stayed with them for a few weeks, and I went through the DTs, and I had no idea who I was or where I was, and sometime in like 2 weeks there, my mom found out that I was staying there, and she called and said, you can't come home, and we can't help you, but do you want to go somewhere where maybe they can? And I said, sure. And they sent me to a treatment center in Minnesota in the winter, and my mom is really smart. Like, I don't give her enough credit. She is a smart lady. She only sent me with T-shirts and shorts because it was like negative 16 degrees with like 4 feet of snow on the ground. And she's like, yeah, you're staying. Whether you like it or not, you're staying. So I had T-shirts and shorts for my entire stay in Minnesota. And then towards the end of it, I really had no idea what was going on in there. I remember every single day we would sit in a circle, and it was a youth facility because I was like 21 years old. And I was sitting in a circle with these kids, and they're all like 13 and 15, and they're going around and they're counting, and they're like 6, 12, 14, 11, and I was like, oh my God, they can't even count. And I was like, I feel so bad for them. And it turns out that it was how many days they were sober, and when they got to me, I didn't even know what day it was. And like, I couldn't have told them for the life of me where we were or what day it was. And they helped me figure out that it was January 15th, and I had 14 days, and it was the longest I'd ever had sober since I was like 12 years old. And I remember I got this feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I didn't know what it was then. And today I know it's hope. It was the first time I ever had hope that I didn't have to drink. And after I got out of there, they suggested I get some additional help. And they said there was a place down in Florida for people just like me that have multiple problems, and I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't think I had any problems. And so they sent me to this treatment center on scholarship, and my parents were so proud of my second scholarship in life was to rehab. I'm sure they were bragging to the whole family. Oh, Sarah got another scholarship. This time's to rehab. And so I came down here in, and it was 2003 when I got down to Florida, and this was the place I went to my first meeting. And I remember I felt like I was crazy because you have to remember I had shaved my head earlier that year, so I didn't have all my hair. And I was wearing, when my mom sent me clothes down here, she sent me my brother's. He's 6'3" and a lot bigger than me. But she, again, wanted me to stand out and be very conspicuous so that I could not disappear. So, and they wouldn't let me have a belt in treatment because they were afraid I would harm myself. So I had pants that I literally had to hold up when I walked. And I looked crazy. And if any of you saw me at that point, I was really skinny, and I was kind of greenish yellow, and I was wearing someone else's clothes, and I had a shaved head. And I just looked like a psych patient that had just gotten out. And I remember that's how I felt when I walked in the rooms, and people all said, like, you'll feel like you're with your family, and you'll feel so comfortable, and this is home. And I was like, I feel like a psych patient who just got let out. And I went to my first meetings, and I didn't know what they were talking about, but and I didn't really understand anything. I like the jaywalker story. I remember when I heard that the first time, like, it made sense to me. Like the rest of this stuff, even though it had to do with alcohol, I could not relate to it. And then they talked about the jaywalker and how he walks into traffic over and over and over and again and gets crushed, and he keeps doing it because he thinks it's fun. And that sounded just like me. And I heard this woman share at one of my first meetings, and she was talking about how she had to have a bottle with her in her car at all times so that she didn't shake while she was driving. And she had one by the bed, so if she had a seizure in the middle of the night, she could take a drink and go back to sleep. And she carried one in really big purses so that she was never without it. And she had 10 years sober. And she was clean cut, and she had a job and a family, and she looked normal and sane and happy. And I remember, again, getting that feeling of like, this woman's just like me, and she hasn't had a drink in 10 years. And I was sold. I was like, I bought into this program, and I liked everything I heard, and I was willing to go after it. Like they said, like I had my last drink, you know, and I asked that woman to sponsor me, and I worked the steps, and I went to meetings, and I chaired meetings, and I rode my bike all over Boca trying to chase sobriety as much as I could. And there was only one thing I wasn't willing to do. I wasn't willing to do the God thing. I didn't really like it, so I skipped it. And I found out later on, it's a pretty significant piece of sobriety. Found out when you skip all the steps that involve God, you skip sobriety, and you skip getting sober, and you skip like the spiritual awakening. And so I skipped a lot of relevant parts of this sobriety, but I liked the fellowship. I thought this was great, super fun. We went to Denny's, and I didn't drink, and I was like, I'm doing fine. I'm getting this thing. I'm really killing it, you know. And the problem with that statement is that I thought I was doing all this, and that I was keeping me sober, and apparently my willpower is pretty strong. I lasted about 3.5 years, and then it ran out, and I didn't have a real solution. And I ran into a bunch of self-inflicted problems. I had made a lot of bad decisions, and I got myself into a bad situation, and I didn't know a way out of it, and I didn't have any sponsor to help me, and I didn't have people that were sober around me, and I didn't go to meetings a lot. So all of a sudden, I didn't know how to get out of the space I was in. And I remember saying to one of my good friends at the time, like, I wish I could rewind and do my sobriety over and do it right. And she said, you know, she tells me today that she said, you can. You don't have to drink. You can start over at any point. I don't remember that. And I picked up a drink within a week. And I didn't think it would take long. I didn't think I would get sick quick. You know, I really thought I had a good 10-year run the first time. I thought it would put together some good drinking time, and then I would get sober at my leisure. And I was back in the psych ward within 2 weeks. And when I came out, I was desperate and scared. And yet I still wasn't done. And I went in and out for every 30 days for like 3 months. And I talked to this girl. I kept going to the same meeting. I went to this meeting on Tuesday night, and I really liked it. And there was this girl in there that I had seen come in. She was from Virginia. She had red hair, and she talked about like rainbows and the color purple all the time. And I really thought she was nuts, and I didn't like her very much. And she shared all the time about the big book and the steps and God, and how she had the problem removed, and she was, you know, no longer crippled by, you know, the desire to drink. And I remember being like, yeah. And after coming in and out, one of the times I went up to her and I said, okay, what is it? You know, I did everything everybody told me. I took all the suggestions. And I can't stop, you know, like I did everything I was supposed to do, and I drank again. And she said, well, did you pray? And I was like, no, I don't do that. And she said, did you ever ask God for help? I'm like, I don't really have one of those. And she's like, well, give it a try the next time you get out of detox. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm out of detox. I'm standing right in front of you. But the next time I got out of detox, I called that girl. I remembered what she said. And I hit my knees, and I said, if anyone's out there or anything's up there, please help me, because I don't want to drink anymore. And I don't think that day was any different than any other, except that I was willing enough to try something I hadn't tried before. And I went back to that meeting and asked that girl to sponsor me. And she became one of my best friends and the greatest teacher I've ever had in terms of what is alcoholism and what is the solution. And she took me through the big book, line by line, word by word, page by page, and shared her experience and gave me a solution to my problem. And she told me that, like, you know, I was either going to believe in something greater than myself or die trying. And she said, you don't need to just worry about the steps that involve God. You need to involve God in all the steps. And she said, you need to seek this solution. And I was like, what solution? She was like, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we carry this message to other people. What's the message? That having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. And I was like, this seems like circular logic. But she did. She, through every one of the steps, she taught me to seek God in this, ask for help, that you are not going to do this step and you are not going to get you sober. You are the problem. You need a solution. And she made it a lot easier. She gave me a break on, I was really worried about this whole God thing, that maybe I just can't believe and that I just don't believe in anything. She's like, well, what do you believe in? And I thought long and hard, and I thought, I believe in friendship. I believe in love and friendship. I know my friends are always there for me. And I feel safe with them, and they take care of me. And I don't always feel that way about my parents because I obviously hadn't done any kind of real 4-step, so I was still mad at them. But I believed in friendship, and she's like, well, why don't you just make your God like a friend? Think of all the characteristics of a friend that you would want to have. Make it the best friend you've ever created, and make that your higher power. And so I sat down and I wrote a list of the characteristics I would want a friend to have. And number one was not judgmental, because I have a habit of doing really stupid things. And then I wanted them to be forgiving and caring and all-knowing, and to see what I'm doing even before I tell them about it, and to know, what's in my heart, and to never leave me and never judge me. And I wrote down all the things that I wish I would have in a friend, and that became my higher power. And in the beginning, I didn't know how to pray, and I first had to ask her, so how do I pray? What do I do? And she's like, well, what do you do now? Because I tried to pray. I'm like, well, I really just feel like I'm talking to my mattress. And she's like, why do you feel that way? And I was like, well, because I'm kneeling and I'm staring at my bed and I'm having this conversation with nobody. It just feels like I'm talking to my mattress. And she's like, well, if you don't think God's in your mattress, then you just are talking to your mattress. And I was like, oh. And she's like, where do you feel the presence of something outside yourself or greater than you? I'm like, yeah, usually in meetings. Usually when I go to a meeting and I sit down and I feel safe and calm and my mind is clear and I can breathe easier. And she's like, well, then maybe you need to take that feeling and see where else you find it. And sitting on my back porch in the morning having a cigarette, I found the same kind of peace and serenity. And so I started talking to God in places where I felt like God was present. Every time I got in my car, I would say, God, please see me safely to my destination. And every time I got there safely. So I was like, well, he's doing a good job. And it was just in the beginning, I had started a new job 3 days out of detox, and I was a little shaky. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I think I'd lied to get the job, so I wasn't really clear on what they were wanting me to do. So I would get nervous all day at work, and I would have to go into the bathroom and kneel down and pray and say, God, just please calm me down. Just help me. Just get through the next 5-10 minutes. And I would go out, and I would realize 30 minutes had gone by, and I was fine. And I started to see that when I asked for something, and it was sincere, that God showed up, and I felt okay. And it was the first time I'd ever had the experience of taking the steps and taking the suggestions and feeling different, by just the actions, and starting to be aware that this is what happens when you take the suggestions, do the action, and leave the results. And it was really working. And I went through the rest of the steps, and in 5, I got rid of all the baggage of my past. And I thought, it would wipe away all the memories of everything I'd ever done or said or anyone that had hurt me. And I found out that it didn't. For me, the relief was that none of those feelings that drove me to drink no longer occurred. I still had the same memory of what had happened, but it no longer owned me. It no longer made me feel the same fear and guilt and shame and remorse that drove me to drink. All of a sudden it just became something that happened. And I remember the promises my sponsor read to me after each of the steps. She would point out the warnings and the promises. And the warning of the 5th step is that we may not overcome drinking, that we may drink again if we don't do a fearless and thorough, 5th step. And the promise is that I can sit at perfect peace and ease alone with myself. And I hadn't been able to do that in a long time. I had the guilt and shame of everything that was running in my head. I had the voices talking to me constantly. And I couldn't sleep very well in the beginning. And I used to go to Walmart at 3 or 4 in the morning and buy baking and cooking stuff, and then I would cook and bake in the middle of the night, and just trying to like outrun myself and my thoughts, and just try to not feel, and just try to get out of self in any way I could. And I did a 5th step, and I slept easily. You know, like I did my hour of meditation afterwards. Like, she told me to sit quietly and just think about the first 5 steps. And I remember like sitting down and like saying a prayer to God, and then doing my hour of trying to sit quietly. And like all I could think was, man, I want a sandwich. I really, really want a sandwich. And like, cause I was really hungry. And it was the first time that was the only thought in my head. Like, there was no racing mind. There was no like conversation with myself of, you're not good enough and you're going to drink again, or you hurt this person, or this is what you did wrong today. It was just silence and quiet. And I fell asleep, and I slept easily. And for me, that was the relief of the 5th step, was that, like, you know, all that stuff no longer owned me. And it didn't wake up with me, and it didn't go to sleep with me. It was in the past, and I left it there. And the rest of the steps, each in their own way, like really changed who I was. And that's what I always tell my sponsees, is that like, I can share my experience and I can take you through the steps the way I was, but you're going to have your own experience, and you're going to have your own results from each of these steps, you know. And for me, like, 9th step was one of the ones that I loved the most, and not because they were easy. A lot of mine were really difficult. I didn't owe money or anything. I didn't steal other than people's time or affection or whatever, but it was really hard to pay back something when it wasn't tangible. I can't just give you $500 and say sorry. You know, it was like I had to go back to people that I really harmed and say, and make my amends, and manage to try to convey an amends without ever using the phrase sorry was really hard. My sponsor and I had to like craft a statement that would work in all situations, so that like I didn't fall back on like, I'm so sorry, and then cry and run away. And you know, I had to go back to the employer that I lost my job because I was drunk at work during their busiest season of the year. From Christmas to Valentine's Day, they're a jewelry company, and I was drunk every single day. And I had to go back to them and make amends. And they had 3 brothers and another part owner. And the 3 brothers were really nice about it. The oldest brother was the president of the company. He wasn't very happy with me. And I had to go back there really soon after I got sober, because I needed a notary stamp and some of the other stuff I had left. And I said to him, like, I wish there was something I could do. He's like, well, you left us in a really bad spot. There's no one to take your position, and we haven't trained anyone. And I said, well, can I help out? Can I come back after work every day and do my job and just do it for free? And he said that would help. And so I did that for like 6 weeks. And then they found somebody, and I trained her, and she didn't work out, and I came back. And for about 4 months, I worked at that company to try to pay back what I had taken. And at the end of it, they were fine with me. The 4th guy that ran that company, his wife was in the rooms, and I had known her throughout my sobriety. And she had a hard time with sobriety. And he and I would talk about like how difficult it was. Like the first time I was in the hospital from having relapsed, he came to visit me. And he's just like, I'm just glad it's not my wife, you know. And she had difficulty in and out with sobriety, and he wouldn't even look at me. When I came back to work there and everything, he was so angry and could not stand me, and he just would not look at me or talk to me. And I wasn't able to really make any difference to them. And I saw him this last year. It was a week before my 8th anniversary. I saw him in the grocery store, and I called over to him like, hey, you may not remember me. Sarah, I worked at your company. He's like, oh my God. He's like, I wouldn't have recognized you. And I told him, I was like, I just want to say thank you. If you and the brothers hadn't fired me, I would have never gotten sober. And I'm so grateful for what you guys did, because it's given me a life beyond anything I could imagine. And I was like, how's your wife? And he said, no, she didn't get it. And she's not well. And she hasn't drawn a sober breath since. And he left her, and he has his 2 kids, and he called his daughter over, who was like 10 or 11 when I knew him. And she came over, and she was in college, and she was wearing her like jersey and her uniform. And he introduced me to his daughter, and he's like, this is Sarah. She knew your mom. And I walked away, and I said thank you, and it's good to see you and everything. And I sent him an email the next day to just say, it was so good to see you, and I want to thank you again for everything you did for me. if there's ever a way I can pay back the debt that I owe you, if I can talk to your wife or help her in any way, or your kids, and I would love to, because I owe you a debt of gratitude I can never repay. And he wrote me back and he said, you already did enough. I'm sure you help a lot of people. And my daughter got hope by just seeing that there is possibilities and that maybe her mom can find peace someday. And I just remember thinking, like, there's no difference between me and her. I got really lucky that something I did made a difference, and that I got sober. And by the grace of God, I've gotten to stay sober. And I have the opportunity to be a daughter to my mom and to show up in my family's life and be a part of and help people. And I just think, like, that's incredibly lucky, because some people don't get that chance or don't get that second chance or haven't yet. And I hope someday that I'll get a call and I'll get to be able to help him. But that's one of those amends that, like, was undone. And, like, I wasn't able to make it at the time. And there was a reason and there was a purpose. There was a time and a place where it needed to happen, and that's what it was. And other ones, like my family, my parents, the first time I got sober, they were just so glad that I'd stopped drinking. They thought it was like a magic miracle, like poof. And they never wanted to talk about sobriety because they thought they would break it if we talked about it. So we did an amends, which was basically, I was like ready to sit down with them and have this conversation. They're like, no, just don't drink, and we're fine. And my mom had gone to one Al-Anon meeting, and she said that their message, and please don't be offended, this is my mom's version of Al-Anon, was we never look backwards, we only look forwards. This is what she got from the one meeting she attended. So that's been her war cry ever since. Is like, we never, whenever I go like, oh, I should apologize to Aunt. No, we only look forwards. We don't look backwards. It's like, so the first amends didn't really have a lot of depth and weight to it. And when I relapsed and I got sober again and I went to go make amends to my parents, it was a very different reception and message that they gave me. I sat down and I had a conversation with them about how I wished I had been a better daughter, and I wish I'd been more honest, and I wish I'd shown up, and I didn't even live up to my own standards, and I'm sorry if I disappointed them, and I wish I could go back and change things, but I can't. Is there anything I can do going forward? And my mom's like, absolutely. You are a terrible relative. And I was like, what? And she's like, your cousins, I have 45 first cousins on her side and 22 aunts and uncles, and they had all written me cards and letters and stuff all throughout my sobriety. When I was in treatment, I got like 50 cards every day. I got packages and presents. They sent letters all throughout my first year. My aunts all sent packages all the time with stuff and like encouragement and everything. And I had sent nothing. I had never written one thank you note. I had never called anyone. I had never written a letter. I had never acknowledged anything that these people did. I acted like I didn't even know them. I really just thought they were like just a mass of people that, like, I knew that at the Christmas party when they all showed up, it was overwhelming and there were so many of them and I had trouble remembering their names, and it was just like, oh, I just need to drink because I need to make this pliable. And so the second time around when I did my amends to my parents, my mom gave me stationery and a address book with all my family's addresses, and she's like, you're going to write letters. You're going to write letters to every single person that wrote letters to you. You're going to write them in the same frequency that they wrote them to you until you have, gotten to know your family. And she was right. I had to like work to find out stuff. Like I had to write to cousins. I didn't know where they went to school. I didn't know what they were studying. I didn't know what they liked or did. And I just thought I was different than everybody in my family. I just thought we have nothing in common. I have nothing to talk to them about. And it turns out that I have a lot in common with all of them. As I wrote letters and communicate with them, they became like friends on Facebook, and they started writing me back and sending me emails. And pretty soon I found out that like I was a lot like all the members of my family. And then my mom's other amends that she asked me to make was that anytime any cousin or anyone she knew ever had a problem, she said, call Sarah. Sarah has problems. She'll help you. And so I had a cousin that tried to commit suicide, and she started calling me, just saying, like, I don't know if how I feel is right. I had a cousin that did commit suicide, and his parents didn't understand what had happened. And I have a cousin that's gay, and she thought that was a problem that I could help with. And I tried to explain to her, I don't think that's a problem, and I don't know how I can help, but send him along. And so she would just tell me, like, call this one, write this one, be friends on Facebook with this one. And so far I've gotten to know, like, my whole family. And I got married in sobriety about 3 years ago. And when I sent out, invitations to my wedding, I was like, nobody else gonna come. Like, I'm the cousin that, like, nobody knew. And I was like the black sheep, and I'm the drunk, And like every single one of them came. And it was like overwhelming because they had to like travel. Like they also all live within a block of each other. Like they don't they don't really go very far when they have to like see family. It's like, oh, let's go down the street. And they all flew to Florida and stayed down here and came to my wedding. And my one cousin just recently got diagnosed with prostate cancer, and I was one of the first people he called. And because he's the gay cousin that obviously we both have problems, and so we relate. And and he was just like, I don't know how to tell my parents, and I don't know how to tell them. I'm like, it's been my experience that like people will love you no matter what, and they'll want to do nothing but help. And since then, it's just been neat to see how the whole family shows up, and his whole family of 6, they were all supposed to have a family reunion in Illinois, and they changed their tickets and they flew to Boston where he is so that they could be with him when he had his first treatments. And we all had bracelets made called the Fluffernutter, because he thinks the fact that he has nut cancer is really funny. And so so he had bracelets made with the prostate cancer ribbon, and he calls them the Fluffernutter bracelets. And so we're all wearing them. But I mean, it's just things like that. Like today I feel a part of my family, and I didn't before. I just felt like I was different, and I just needed to drink and make this all disappear. And my life today is it's way beyond anything I thought it would be. Like I came in here because I didn't want to keep shaking and getting sick and ending up in hospitals, and I didn't want to die. And I would have settled for just that, just relief from feeling like that. And I got so much more. Like I said, I got married a few years ago. Like I told my story at a lunch group meeting, like, I don't know, 6.5 years ago. And this guy in the back of the room, I'd seen him before in and out of treatment centers. When I was in and out, he was a tech. He was not in treatment. He had watched me go in and out, and he heard me tell my story at like 2 years, and he asked me out in the parking lot. And I just remember being like, did you listen to the story, or you want to date that? And we went to, he asked me out to go to the movies, and I showed up, and there was like a couple girls I knew from the fellowship, and they were sitting outside, and I was like, hey, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, we're waiting for Mark. I was like, oh, it's odd. My date's with Mark. And turns out he got nervous, and he asked a bunch of our friends. So it was a first date of like 12 people. It's a little awkward. But it all worked out, apparently. A year later, he asked me if I would marry him. So things have been good. And I really never saw myself getting married, other unless it was drunk in Vegas. That was kind of like a hazy picture of what it was going to look like. It was probably going to be a bad idea and drunk in Vegas. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions I've made sober. And, I have a job today. I started as the admin assistant. I used to always apply for jobs that were just below what I could do, so that there was no like risk or anything involved, so that I didn't have to be afraid that I couldn't do it. I would just take a receptionist job because I'm pretty sure I could answer the phone. And this time I applied for a job that was like a little better, and I got it. And my boss trained me on how to run this like vitamin company. And then about 2 years ago, he left the company, and I became the CEO of it. And like I applied for an admin assistant position. And like 3 years later, I'm running the company, and they trust me with the office. They trust me with the business. They trust me with their money, their bank accounts, and that's all because of AA. And I've never misplaced anything that And recently, I made a mistake at work. I forgot to order something on the day I was supposed to, and it caused a big problem because we didn't have it when it was supposed to be in. And I sat on that for 2 weeks, knowing that I had made this mistake and that I had not ordered. And I sat for 2 weeks like on edge and not knowing what to do, and how do I do this, and how do I undo it, and called my sponsor, and she said, it's pretty simple. And I'm like, I have to tell them I made a mistake? And she's like, yeah, it's pretty simple. Just tell them you made a mistake. I was like, okay. And she's like, just that. Just tell them you made a mistake, And I did, and they were like, okay, you're human. Like, I had really thought they were going to fire me on the spot, and it was pretty minor, and that's what they said. They're like, oh, that's not a big deal. You're human. And that was over and done with, and I had wasted 2 weeks being anxious about something that was a non-entity. And Alcoholics Anonymous is just, it's changed me from the person I was. You know, I used to just be so afraid and insecure and just wanted you to like me, and I wanted to keep you far enough away so you didn't actually know me, but you liked what you saw and that it was a good show. And I have to learn today that, like, I have to actually be a likable person and do esteemable things and care about people and not care what they think, just care about them. And that came through working the steps. You know, like, I didn't see how the steps, when they say, like, you just have to change everything, I didn't see how you could do that. Like, I really couldn't wrap my mind around, like, how I was going to fix all the broken parts that I was. And as it was like God gave me something like to do, like to distract me while he fixed everything that was broken. You know, it's like I did the steps, I took the action, I went to meetings, I worked with my sponsor, I worked with newcomers, and while I was doing all this work, God was fixing me. And as I started to take the actions and do the steps, like, I started to get the results of, like, I thought differently and acted differently and behaved differently. And my sponsor told me, like, I couldn't really understand what the definition of a psychic change was. I was like, it sounds like hocus pocus. It sounds really silly. And she was like, psychic change is to think, feel, and do differently. And I found out later on that, you know, the appendix in the back of the book about a spiritual awakening is that it's a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. And I didn't know how that could happen. Like, I was a sarcastic, angry, bitchy, not nice person. And I was critical of everyone. I was judgmental. And I don't know how to make that go away and how to stop doing it and how to fix it. And it came to be that the steps changed those things. Like, in 6 and 7, it showed me that those things were no longer assets. They didn't serve me or anyone else. That they didn't serve a purpose in uniting me with the fellowship of the Spirit or of connecting me with God and my fellows. And they were a hindrance, and they got in my way, and that's why they needed to go. And each of the defects that I didn't know how I could change it or how I could get rid of it, I asked God to show me how it affects me. And he showed me that it was the thing that was getting in my way, and it was no longer useful, and that I had to let go of it, and that was my part in it. I had to let go of the defect and the behavior, but he was going to take it away in his time. And I learned that there were certain things that I didn't think I could fix, but, like, they got better as I got better, you know, like, they lessened. Like, I didn't need to be sarcastic and mean, you know, to people. I could keep the thoughts that I had to myself because they weren't nice, you know. And I love this woman that I heard that she used to tell me that there was an acid test for what I was speaking, and it was, it's think, and is it thoughtful, honest, intelligent, necessary, and kind. And there has never been one thing that I've ever said that matched all those acid tests. I've never come up with anything that's thoughtful, intelligent, necessary, honest, and kind. So somewhere along the way, things like were slipping by that they weren't necessary to say. They weren't kind. They weren't intelligent. You know, they were just things I really wanted to say right now because it's funny. And I had to learn that, like, that harms people and that harms me. And so I had to start thinking before I spoke. And I had to start thinking about my actions before I did them. And those kind of things taught me how to be a better person. And they gave me the experience of finding out what happens when I have these defects that I don't take care of. What time? It's 6? Oh, good. Oh. So I got all better, and I'm sober. No, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I thank you all for listening, and I'm glad we're out here.